The moment I walked into that ballroom, I knew everything was about to change. Palm Beach dripped with old money and new aspirations, and on that balmy April evening, both collided under crystal chandeliers at the Oceanside Country Club. I stood at the entrance, clutching my leather portfolio, the weight of the documents inside anchoring me to reality while everything else felt like a surreal dream or nightmare, depending on how you looked at it. Miss Carter? The attendant checked his list with practiced efficiency. Emily Carter? Yes, I replied, forcing confidence into my voice. I believe I'm expected. A knowing smile passed over his face. I was indeed expected, but not in the way Adrian Cole, my business partner and the man of the hour, anticipated. In his mind, I would be arriving as his meek, supportive business partner, ready to applaud his engagement to Victoria Lane, heiress to one of Florida's oldest fortunes. Ready to fade into the background as I'd done for the past 5 years, while he took credit for our shared success. The grand ballroom unfolded before me like a scene from a movie I didn't audition for. Champagne flowed from fountains, ice sculptures, caught the light in dazzling prisms, and Palm Beach's elite moved through the space in designer gowns and bespoke suits, their laughter carrying the distinct timbre of privilege. I smoothed down my midnight blue dress, the most expensive thing I owned, purchased specifically for tonight. Not to impress, but to armor myself, to remind myself that I belonged here as much as anyone, despite what Adrian had been whispering to the Lane family behind my back. Emily, you came. Adrian's voice cut through the ambient chatter as he approached, Victoria gleaming at his side like a trophy. He air-kissed my cheek, his cologne expensive and cloying. I wasn't sure you'd make it. I wouldn't miss it, I replied, meeting his eyes steadily. There was a flicker there, uncertainty perhaps, before his practiced charm reasserted itself. Victoria extended her hand, diamonds catching the light from every finger, her engagement ring the centerpiece of her collection. Emily, so lovely to finally meet you properly. Adrian speaks so highly of your administrative skills. Administrative. Not creative, not visionary, not equal. I'd heard through mutual connections how Adrian had been positioning me, to Victoria's family, as his assistant, essentially. The loyal worker bee who kept things running while he made the real decisions. Victoria, I nodded, shaking her hand. Congratulations on your engagement. The ring is stunning. Isn't it? She preened, flashing the 5-carat diamond. Adrian says it's nearly as valuable as the villa he's giving us as a wedding gift. Daddy was so impressed when he heard about the Ocean Drive property. My heart stopped, then resumed at double speed. There it was, confirmation of what I'd overheard at Martini's Bistro 3 weeks ago. Adrian promising my villa, my inheritance, my sanctuary, the last piece of my father I had left, to Victoria's family to cement his place in their world. The Ocean Drive villa, I repeated carefully. How generous. Adrian's arm slid around my shoulders, his grip tightening imperceptibly. Let's get you a drink, Em. Victoria, darling, your father was looking for you by the East Terrace. As Victoria glided away, Adrian steered me toward a quiet corner, his smile never wavering for the benefit of onlookers. What are you doing? He hissed once we were relatively private. You're supposed to be supporting me tonight. Supporting you in giving away my property? I kept my voice level, despite the tremor of anger I felt. He had the audacity to look exasperated. It's business, Emily. This marriage opens doors for us both. The Lane family has connections we couldn't dream of. Sometimes you have to sacrifice a pawn to win the game. The villa isn't a pawn, Adrian. It's mine. Legally and emotionally. My father left it to me, not to our company, and certainly not to you. I remembered the day we'd signed our partnership agreement 5 years ago. Adrian, with his Harvard MBA and family connections, bringing the credibility, me with my design vision, and the Ocean Drive villa, which would serve as our first showcase property and office. We'd been equals on paper, but somewhere along the way, Adrian had decided he deserved more than his share. Don't be difficult, he snapped, dropping his voice lower. The Lanes expect a certain lifestyle. This is how it works in their world. You can have the condo in Boca. The condo in... I couldn't finish the sentence. So absurd was his suggestion. The villa was worth 10 times that condo, not to mention its emotional value. Adrian sighed, placing his drink on a passing waiter's tray. Look, I didn't want to do this now, but you're leaving me no choice. I've had the company lawyers draw up new papers. The way things are structured, I can force your hand on this. The company technically owns the villa now, and as majority shareholder... You're not the majority shareholder, I interrupted. We're 50-50. A slow, reptilian smile spread across his face. Check the paperwork from last quarter's financing round. You signed off on a dilution of your shares to secure that loan for the Seabreeze project. You were too busy with the designs to read the fine print, apparently. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I had trusted him with the paperwork while I focused on the designs that had won us architectural awards and put our firm on the map. Had I really missed something so fundamental? That's fraud, I whispered. That's business, he corrected, straightening his cufflinks. And it's done. So be a good sport about it, Smile for the lanes. After all, what are you going to do? Create a scene at my engagement party? He looked at me with the confidence of a man who knew he'd already won. You're too soft for that, Em. Always have been. It's why I handle the tough negotiations while you pick out fabric swatches. With that parting shot, he returned to the center of the room where Victoria waited. Her family gathered around her like a protective barrier of wealth and influence. Gregory Lane, Victoria's father, clapped Adrian on the shoulder as he rejoined them, the gesture of a man welcoming a worthy addition to his dynasty. I stood frozen, the portfolio clutched against my chest. Inside were the original deed to the Ocean Drive villa, the partnership agreement, and something Adrian clearly wasn't expecting. The results of the forensic accounting investigation I'd quietly commissioned 3 weeks ago after overhearing his plans at Martini's. The orchestra shifted to a new piece, signaling the formal start of the evening. Champagne flutes were distributed for the official toast. Adrian stood at the center of it all, Victoria on his arm, both of them glowing with the particular radiance of people who believed they were untouchable. I had exactly 20 minutes until Adrian's planned announcement about the villa gift. 20 minutes to decide. Walk away with whatever dignity I could salvage, or stand up for everything I'd worked for. The weight of the portfolio in my hands suddenly felt like possibility rather than burden. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention. Gregory Lane's authoritative voice silenced the room instantly. He stood at the center of the ballroom, a living portrait of power in his tailored tuxedo, silver hair catching the light like a crown. Victoria and Adrian stepped forward to join him, the perfect couple awaiting his blessing. Tonight, we celebrate not just the union of my daughter Victoria with Adrian Cole, but the joining of two visions for the future. His eyes surveyed the room like a general inspecting his troops. The Lane family has built Palm Beach for generations, and now Adrian brings his own vision of architectural excellence to our family. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. I remained at the back, my heart pounding against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Nearby, Patricia Lane, Victoria's mother, stood with a cluster of society women, all of them appraising Adrian with the calculating eyes of investors evaluating an acquisition. In fact, Gregory continued, Adrian has shown his commitment to this union in the most extraordinary way. As a wedding gift to my daughter, he's presenting her with one of the most exquisite properties on Ocean Drive. A collective murmur of appreciation swept the room. Oceanfront property in Palm Beach was rarer than the diamonds adorning the women's necks. Perhaps Adrian would like to say a few words about this generous gesture, Gregory concluded, stepping back to allow Adrian the spotlight. This was it. The moment of truth. His or mine. I felt someone watching me and turned to meet Patricia Lane's gaze. There was something calculating in her expression, something that told me she suspected not all was as presented. I'd heard rumors that before marrying Gregory, she'd been a ruthless corporate attorney. Perhaps she recognized something in me, another woman who wouldn't be easily dismissed. Adrian cleared his throat, adjusting his bow tie with a practiced gesture. Thank you, Gregory. When I founded Cole & Carter Design 5 years ago, founded, not co-founded. My fingers tightened around the portfolio. I had a vision of creating spaces that would become the heritage of future generations. The Ocean Drive Villa represents everything our firm stands, though, for elegance, innovation, and timeless quality. It seems only fitting that as Victoria and I begin our life together, this property becomes part of the Lane family legacy. I began moving forward, each step deliberate on the marble floor. A few heads turned, curious at my advance toward the center of the room. The villa has been my pride and joy, Adrian continued, either not noticing my approach or choosing to ignore it. I've personally overseen every renovation to ensure it meets the standards the Lane family deserves. He'd overseen nothing. I had lived in that villa during the renovations, sleeping on a mattress surrounded by dust and paint cans while transforming my father's dated beachfront home into the showcase property that launched our firm. Adrian had visited exactly twice, both times to bring potential clients through. I was halfway to the center now. Victoria spotted me first, her perfect smile faltering slightly as she registered my determined expression. In fact, Adrian said, reaching inside his jacket, I've brought along some preliminary designs for further enhancements Victoria has requested. A new eastern wing, a expanded pool area. Excuse me, my voice cut through his smoothly. I'd reached the edge of their circle now, standing just beyond the invisible barrier that separated the central players from their audience. The room stilled. Gregory Lane raised an eyebrow, more curious than annoyed at the interruption. Emily, Adrian said, his tone warning though his smile remained fixed. Perhaps we can talk later. We're in the middle of something important. Yes, we are, I agreed, stepping fully into their circle now. We're in the middle of discussing the Ocean Drive villa, and since I'm the sole legal owner of that property, I believe I should be part of this conversation. A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. Victoria's head snapped toward Adrian, her eyes narrowing. Emily is my business partner, Adrian explained quickly to the Lanes, adding with a dismissive laugh, she handles our interior design division. There seems to be some confusion about the corporate structure. No confusion, I said, opening my portfolio and extracting the deed. The villa never became company property, Adrian. My father left it to me personally, and I never transferred ownership to Colin Carter Design. I have the original deed right here, dated and notarized. I handed it to Gregory Lane, whose legal training had him automatically scanning the document with practiced efficiency. His expression darkened as he read. Adrian? Victoria's voice had lost its musical quality, sharpening to a point. What is this about? Adrian's charm was evaporating quickly, like morning dew under a harsh sun. It's a misunderstanding. Emily's confused about— I'm not confused about anything, I interrupted, pulling out the second document. This is the report from Blackwell Forensic Accounting, detailing how funds were diverted from our joint business accounts over the past 18 months, nearly $3 million, Adrian. Care to explain where that went? The whispers were growing louder now. Several guests, including potential clients, edged closer, not wanting to miss a word. Adrian's face had gone from tan to ashen. This is completely inappropriate. We can discuss company matters privately. Like you discussed gifting my property privately? I asked. Or like you discussed with Robert Chen at Martini's 3 weeks ago that I was too soft to fight back. Victoria's diamond bracelet caught the light as she crossed her arms. Daddy, what is going on? Gregory Lane was still examining the deed, his expression inscrutable. According to this, Mr. Cole has no ownership claim whatsoever on the Ocean Drive property. He looked up, fixing Adrian with the stare that had intimidated opposing counsel for decades. Did you misrepresent your assets to my family, Mr. Cole? Of course not, Adrian protested, but sweat was beading along his hairline now. It's a complex situation. The company doesn't own it either, I said firmly. And while we're clarifying things, I should mention that our partnership is indeed 50-50, despite what Adrian may have suggested. That paperwork he mentioned earlier? Another fabrication. I've brought copies of our current corporate structure verified by our company attorney yesterday. I could see the moment Adrian realized he was cornered. His eyes darted around the room, seeking an escape route, finding none. The crowd had formed a loose circle around us, witnessing his unraveling with the fascinated horror of spectators at an accident scene. Victoria, he tried, reaching for her hand. Let me explain. She stepped back, her face a mask of humiliation and fury. You lied to my family? About owning property you don't even control? It's worse than that, Patricia Lane interjected, having moved forward to examine the accounting report over her husband's shoulder. Gregory, look at these transactions. Classic embezzlement pattern. The money was moved to offshore accounts. The atmosphere in the room shifted, palpably. What had begun as an engagement celebration was transforming into something else entirely, the public downfall of a man who'd reached too far on stolen dreams. Victoria yanked the massive diamond ring from her finger, letting it drop to the marble floor with a sound that echoed in the sudden silence. We're done, Adrian. Don't call me. Don't contact my family. My father's attorneys will be in touch. With that, she turned and strode toward the exit, her parents falling in beside her like a royal procession. The other Lane family members followed suit, then their closest friends, then business associates unwilling to be seen supporting the suddenly toxic Adrian Cole. Within minutes, half the room had emptied. Those who remained watched Adrian with expressions ranging from pity to schadenfreude, already mentally composing the society gossip they would share tomorrow. Adrian stood alone at the center of his ruined engagement party, the abandoned ring glinting accusingly at his feet. "You did this," he said when I approached him, his voice barely audible. "You humiliated me in front of everyone." "No, Adrian," I replied calmly, closing my portfolio. "You did this to yourself. I just refused to be your victim." As I turned to leave, I felt lighter than I had in years. The villa was still mine. My dignity was intact. And for the first time since our partnership began, I was walking away from Adrian Cole as his equal, perhaps even his superior, in the eyes of the world that had meant everything to him. The morning after Adrian's spectacular downfall broke clear and bright. Over Palm Beach, the sun rising over the Atlantic as if nothing had changed, but everything had. I sat on my terrace at the Ocean Drive villa, my villa, coffee warming my hands as I watched waves crash against the shore. The same view I'd grown up with, the same panorama my father had loved. The property Adrian had so casually promised away, as if my inheritance were his to distribute. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since I'd left the Oceanside Country Club. Texts and calls from mutual acquaintances, business associates, even journalists who'd somehow gotten my number. Palm Beach thrived on scandal, and Adrian's humiliation was the biggest since the Whitmore embezzlement 3 years ago. I hadn't answered any of them. Instead, I'd driven home, kicked off my heels, and poured myself a generous glass of my father's favorite scotch. I'd stood in his old study, now my home office, and raised a silent toast to him. "You were right, Dad. Always stand your ground." The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. Through the security camera, I saw a sleek black town car in my driveway and Patricia Lane standing at my door, immaculate in a cream linen suit despite the early hour. "Mrs. Lane," I said as I opened the door, unable to mask my surprise. "I wasn't expecting you." "Clearly," she said, taking in my silk pajamas with an arched eyebrow. "May I come in? I believe we have matters to discuss." I stepped aside, suddenly aware of how different our worlds were. Patricia Lane moved through spaces as if she owned them, which, in Palm Beach, she often did. The Lane family holdings included half the commercial real estate on Worth Avenue and significant residential properties throughout the island. "Beautiful home," she commented, her gaze sweeping across the open living area with its wall of windows framing the ocean. "The restoration is impressive. Original terrazzo floors?" "Yes, I insisted on keeping them. Coffee? Please." I led her to the terrace, curious about this unexpected visit. Last night, the Lane family had departed the engagement party like a royal court withdrawing favor, their collective disapproval a force that had emptied the room within minutes. Now their matriarch was in my home, admiring my design choices. "I'll be direct, Miss Carter," Patricia said once we were seated. "Last night was enlightening." I waited, unwilling to make this easier. For her. The Lanes had been prepared to benefit from Adrian's attempted theft of my property. Their disapproval had been for his deception, not for the underlying ethics. "Gregory and I would like to apologize," she continued, surprising me. "We had no idea the Ocean Drive property wasn't Adrian's to offer. Had we known, we never would have encouraged Victoria's involvement with him." "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "But I suspect you didn't come here just to apologize." A hint of a smile touched her lips. "Perceptive. I like that." She set down her coffee cup with precision. "The Lane Foundation is breaking ground on a new cultural center next month. The architect we hired has proven disappointing. His vision lacks originality." I blinked, recalibrating my understanding of this visit. "And you're interested in Cole and Carter design for the project?" "Not exactly." Her gaze was direct, evaluating. "I'm interested in Emily Carter Design, or whatever you choose to call your new firm." "My new—" I stopped, the implications washing over me. "You're suggesting I break from Adrian and start my own company?" "I'm suggesting you've outgrown a partner who takes credit for your work and attempts to steal your property," Patricia corrected. "Based on the designs in your portfolio, which, yes, I've studied extensively since last night, you're the creative force behind your firm's success. Adrian's contribution appears to be primarily social." The assessment was brutally accurate, yet despite everything, dissolving the partnership felt like a seismic shift. Cole and Carter Design had been my life for 5 years. "The cultural center contract would be significant," Patricia continued. 7 figures, with considerable freedom for the right designer. "Gregory and I believe you might be that designer." "Why me?" I asked. "There are dozens of established architects in South Florida." Patricia studied me for a moment before answering. "Because you stood up for yourself last night when it would have been easier to walk away. Because you had the integrity to expose a lie, even at the risk of your own social standing." She leaned forward slightly. And because I recognize something in you that reminds me of myself 30 years ago. I tried to imagine Patricia Lane 30 years younger, before she'd married Gregory, when she was still making her name as one of Miami's most formidable corporate attorneys. The comparison was both flattering and intimidating. I appreciate the opportunity, I said, but I need to consider the legal implications of dissolving my partnership with Adrian. After last night, it's unlikely to be amicable. Patricia waved a dismissive hand. Gregory's legal team can handle that. Consider it part of our apology for not vetting Adrian more thoroughly before he became involved with our daughter. The offer was tempting. A clean break from Adrian, a prestigious new client, legal support from one of the most powerful families in Florida. Yet something held me back. I need to do this my way, I said finally. I appreciate the Lane family's support, but if I start my own firm, I want to succeed on my own terms, not as someone's protege. Rather than offense, I saw respect flash in Patricia's eyes. Understood. The offer stands, regardless. Take your time deciding about the partnership, but don't take too long on the cultural center. We'll need preliminary designs by the end of next month. She stood to leave, then paused, looking out at the ocean view. Your father would be proud, Miss Carter. Not many people have the courage to stand up in a room full of Palm Beach society and speak truth to power. After she left, I remained on the terrace, turning over her words and offer in my mind. The idea of my own firm, my name alone on the letterhead, was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. My phone buzzed again, and for the first time since last night, I checked the screen. An email from our company. Attorney Marcus Whitfield. Emily, we need to talk ASAP. Adrian's emptying company accounts. Call me. Ice formed in my stomach. Of course Adrian wouldn't go quietly. He'd lost his fiancée, his social standing, and his credibility in one catastrophic evening. Now he was trying to salvage what he could. Financially, at least. I dialed Marcus immediately, my mind already racing ahead to what needed to be done. Freeze the accounts. Secure the client contracts. Protect the intellectual property. The designs that represented years of my creative work. Emily, Marcus answered on the first ring. Thank God. I've been trying to reach you since midnight. Adrian's gone rogue. He transferred nearly all the operating funds to a new account early this morning. I've filed emergency motions, but how bad? Is it? I interrupted, already moving inside to my office. Bad. He's also contacted your top 5 clients, telling them the firm is restructuring and all projects should go through him directly. Johnson and Patel have already called me, concerned. Johnson and Patel are biggest commercial clients, projects worth millions. What do we do? I asked, pulling out my laptop. Meet me at the office in 30 minutes. Bring every document you have related to the company founding and your specific design contributions. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. As I gathered documents and changed clothes, a strange calm settled over me. Last night had been about protecting what was already mine, the villa. Today would be about fighting for what I'd built, my professional reputation and future. Adrian had called me too soft to fight back. He was about to discover just how wrong he'd been. The Cole & Carter design office occupied the ground floor of a renovated Art Deco building on Royal Palm Way, prime Palm Beach real estate that had consumed most of our initial capital. I'd argued for something more modest to start, but Adrian had been insistent. Perception is reality in this business. We need to look successful to become successful. Now, as I pulled into the parking lot, I wondered if we'd ever truly been successful, or just maintained an expensive facade that masked financial instability. Marcus Whitfield waited for me at the entrance, his normally immaculate appearance showing signs of a sleepless night, loosened tie, stubble shadowing his jaw. As the firm's attorneys, since our founding, Marcus knew where all the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking. His loyalty had always seemed divided between Adrian and me, but this morning, his expression suggested he'd chosen a side. He cleared out his office last night, Marcus said without preamble as he let us in. Took his client files, his computer, even the artwork from the walls. I stepped into our reception area. My design, inspired by coastal modernism with clean lines and a calming palette of blues and whites, and felt a jolt of wrongness. The large abstract painting that had hung behind Melanie's desk was missing, leaving a conspicuously bare wall. Adrian had purchased that painting from an up-and-coming Miami artist last year, using company funds but claiming it as his personal investment in local talent. What about Melanie? I asked, referring to our receptionist and office manager. And the design team? I called them all, Told them to work from home today until we sort this out. Melanie says Adrian instructed her to redirect all incoming calls to his cell phone before he left last night. My own office appeared untouched. The same organized chaos of material. Samples, blueprints, and sketches. Adrian had always dismissed my workspace as cluttered, failing to understand that creativity rarely thrived in sterile environments. How bad is it financially? I asked as we settled in my office, Marcus taking the client chair while I circled my desk. He transferred $427,000 to a new account under his name only. That's nearly all your operating capital. He left about $30,000 in the main account, presumably to avoid complete emptying, which would trigger automatic fraud alerts. Can we get it back? I've filed emergency injunctions, but banks move slowly, especially with business accounts. The bigger immediate problem is client retention. If Adrian convinces key clients to work with him directly, the company could be effectively hollowed out within days. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache forming. He's always been the client-facing partner. They know him, trust him. But they've seen your designs, Marcus pointed out. They've approved your concepts, your vision. Most don't even know which designs are mine versus his, I admitted. Adrian always presented everything as our work to clients, then took full credit in social settings. Marcus frowned, making notes on his legal pad. We need to establish clear attribution of intellectual property then. Do you have records showing which designs were specifically yours? I hesitated. Like many creative people, my process was intuitive rather than systematic. I had sketches, digital files, and endless iterations, but I'd never cataloged them with the specific intention of proving authorship. I have my original notebooks, I offered, and emails discussing concepts, but Adrian was always copied on final presentations to clients. That complicates things, Marcus admitted. In a partnership dissolution, intellectual property becomes contentious precisely because it's often collaborative. He leaned forward. Emily, I have to ask, given what happened at the engagement party and now this financial maneuver, are you certain you want to fight for the company rather than starting fresh? The question echoed Patricia Lane's suggestion from earlier that morning. Walk away. Start new. Avoid the messy battle. This isn't just about money or clients, I said finally. It's about setting the record straight. For 5 years, I've let Adrian position himself as the visionary while I did the actual creating. I've let him take credit for my designs, my concepts, my innovations. I won't let him take my clients too. Marcus nodded, something like respect flickering in his eyes. Then we fight. But you should know, Adrian has already retained Hargrove and Associates. He named one of Miami's most aggressive corporate law firms, known for scorched earth tactics, in business disputes. Of course he has, I muttered. Adrian always went nuclear when threatened. So what's our next move? We need to contact each major client personally, today. Explain the situation, emphasize your role as the primary designer on their projects, and reassure them about continuity. They're more likely to believe Adrian's version, I pointed out. He's been their main contact. Then bring proof, Marcus said simply. Show them your original sketches, your process. Make it impossible to deny your contribution. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. I glanced down to see a message from an unknown number. This is Victoria Lane. Can we meet? I have information about Adrian you need to hear. Today, if possible. I showed the message to Marcus, whose eyebrows rose. Interesting timing. The Lanes could be powerful allies in this situation, especially if Victoria has specific information about Adrian's plans. Or it could be a trap, I countered. For all I know, they've reconciled and she's gathering information for him. After last night? Unlikely. The Lanes value their reputation above everything. Adrian humiliated them publicly. Marcus checked his watch. I suggest meeting her in a public place while I start drafting formal dissolution papers. We need to move quickly before Adrian approaches more clients. I texted Victoria back, suggesting Green's Pharmacy lunch counter, a Palm Beach institution where privacy would be impossible. Her response came immediately. Perfect. Noon. What about the office? I asked Marcus, looking around at the, space I'd helped design, where I'd spent countless late nights perfecting presentations and refining concepts. Don't touch anything in Adrian's former office, he advised. Document everything that's missing. We'll need it for the legal proceedings. He paused, his expression softening slightly. Emily, you should prepare yourself. This will get personal and ugly. Adrian will try to damage your professional reputation to save his own. He already tried to steal my home, I reminded Marcus. I'm past worrying about his opinion of me. After Marcus left to begin legal proceedings, I sat at my desk, surrounded by the physical evidence of my creative life, materials, sketches, models, 5 years of work that Adrian had been willing to discard without a second thought. My gaze fell on a small, framed photo of my father and me at the Ocean Drive villa, taken shortly before his unexpected heart attack 3 years ago. He stood with his arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling, the ocean stretching behind us. He'd built his accounting firm from nothing, maintaining his integrity in an industry where corners were often cut. Success without principles isn't success, Emmy, he'd often told me. It's just an expensive form of failure. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of William Johnson, our largest client. It was time to start fighting for what was mine. Green's Pharmacy hadn't changed since I was a child. The same worn counter stools, the same faded menu boards, the same middle-aged waitresses who called everyone honey, regardless of their net worth. It was one of the few places in Palm Beach where old money, tourists, and working locals sat elbow to elbow, united by a craving for authentic milkshakes and club sandwiches. I arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a stool near the back with clear sightlines to both entrances. The morning's calls to clients had gone better than expected. William Johnson had been surprised but ultimately supportive after I'd walked him through my original concept sketches for his family's beachfront compound. I always wondered why the presentations felt different from the meetings, he'd admitted. Adrian's explanations never quite matched the vision in the blueprints. Victoria Lane arrived precisely at noon, drawing glances despite her obvious attempt at discretion. Even dressed down in white linen pants and a simple blue blouse, she carried the unmistakable aura of wealth. Something in her posture, the quality of her clothing, the confidence of someone who's never had to worry about a bill. "Emily," she said, sliding onto the stool beside me. Up close, I could see the strain around her eyes, the slight puffiness suggesting a sleepless night. "Thank you for meeting me." "Of course," I replied, studying her. Gone was the ice princess from last night's party, replaced by someone more human and decidedly less certain. "I was surprised to hear from you." She ordered an iced tea, waiting until the waitress moved away before speaking again. "I owe you an apology. When Adrian and I got engaged, he told me you were a minor partner who handled the decorating side of the business. I believed him. Most people did," I acknowledged, more tired than bitter. "Adrian has always been convincing." "My mother recognized your name immediately when we announced the engagement," Victoria continued. "She remembered your father, said he was the only honest accountant in South Florida." A small smile crossed her face. High praise from Patricia Lane. "Your mother came to see me this morning," I said, watching her reaction. "She mentioned a cultural center project." Victoria nodded. "That's actually connected to why I wanted to meet. After what happened last night, Adrian called me." She pulled out her phone, placing it on the counter between us. Multiple times, voicemails, texts. I didn't respond, but he threatened me, she said quietly. Said if I didn't help fix things with my family, he'd release private photos from our relationship. Then he mentioned you. Said he'd make sure you'd never work in Palm Beach again. My stomach tightened. "Did you keep the messages?" "Everyone. And I recorded our final conversation when he called at 3 this morning." She glanced around before continuing, her voice lower. "Emily, he's unraveling. He talked about destroying design files, contacting your clients with stories about you stealing his work. He mentioned something about offshore accounts and moving assets before, quote, 'that bitch and her lawyer can freeze anything.'" The waitress returned with Victoria's tea and took our lunch orders. I used the interruption to process what she'd told me. Adrian's vindictiveness wasn't surprising, but the extent of his planning was concerning. "I'm sorry about the villa," Victoria said once we were alone again. "If I'd known it was yours, I never would have." She trailed off, looking genuinely embarrassed. The way Adrian described it, I thought he'd designed and built it himself. "He's never designed anything himself," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "He has taste and an eye for talent, but the creative work has always been mine." Victoria nodded slowly. I suspected something wasn't right. The few times I asked detailed questions about design concepts, he'd get vague or change the subject. She hesitated. "My father has connections at First Atlantic Bank. After Adrian started making threats last night, Daddy made some calls. Adrian tried to wire nearly $500,000 to an account in the Caymans this morning. The transfer was blocked." My conversation with Marcus flashed through my mind. So Adrian had tried to move the money offshore after his first attempt to empty the company accounts. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked directly. "Last night, Your family couldn't get away from me fast enough. Victoria had the grace to look chagrined. We were shocked and embarrassed. Finding out your fiancé is a fraud in front of half of Palm Beach society isn't easy. She straightened, meeting my eyes directly. But the Lanes pay their debts. Adrian used our family name and connections to hurt you. We're making it right. By blocking his transfer? That's just the start. My father has already contacted several of your major clients, discreetly, of course, to let them know the Lane family has complete confidence in your design capabilities. She took a sip of tea. In Palm Beach, that kind of endorsement matters. I sat back, reassessing Victoria Lane. Behind the polished exterior was a sharper mind than Adrian had likely appreciated. And what do you want in return? A flash of respect crossed her face at my directness. We want Adrian contained. The photos he's threatening to release wouldn't just embarrass me, they'd embarrass my family. And the Lanes don't do embarrassment, I finished for her. So this is damage control. Partly, she admitted. But it's also the right thing to do. Adrian deceived us both, used us both. I'm proposing we help each other. Our food arrived, a club sandwich for me, a salad for Victoria. We ate in thoughtful silence for a few minutes. There's something else, Victoria said finally, setting down her fork. Adrian kept a second set of books for the company. He bragged about it once when he'd had too much to drink. Said it was how he afforded the engagement ring without touching his trust fund. My appetite vanished. Tax fraud? Among other things, I suspect. She reached into her purse and withdrew a small USB drive. 3 months ago, he asked me to store some backup files in my family's safe. Said it was standard practice to keep copies of important business documents off-site. She placed the drive on the counter between us. I made a copy last night. I haven't looked at the contents, but I stared at the innocuous black rectangle. It could be nothing, or it could be evidence of years of financial manipulation. Why give this to me instead of going to the authorities? I asked, not touching the drive. Because you deserve the chance to protect yourself and your company first, Victoria said simply. If there's fraud, it could impact your professional reputation too, even if you weren't involved. She met my eyes steadily. Consider it a peace offering from the Lane family. As we finished our lunch, I studied Victoria more carefully. The entitled socialite from the engagement party had been replaced by someone more nuanced. Still privileged, still accustomed to power, but also practical and surprisingly straightforward. What will you do now? I asked as we prepared to leave. About Adrian, I mean. A cold smile touched her lips, briefly revealing the daughter of Patricia, Lane. Let's just say Adrian Cole will find Palm Beach, and Miami, and most of South Florida, unwelcoming for the foreseeable future. The Lane family may not control everything, but we have influence in the places that matter to someone like him. Outside Green's Pharmacy, standing in the bright Florida sunshine, Victoria extended her hand. I hope this isn't the end of our acquaintance, Emily. Palmy tea. Beach could use more women who aren't afraid to stand up for themselves. As I watched her slide into the waiting black Bentley, I realized that in losing a corrupt partner, I might have gained something more valuable. Allies with both principles and power. The USB drive sat on my desk like a digital Pandora's box, simultaneously tempting and terrifying. After leaving Green's Pharmacy, I'd driven straight back to the Ocean Drive villa, needing the comfort of my own space to process the morning's revelations. My finger hovered over the laptop's power button. Once I looked at these files, there would be no going back. If Adrian had indeed been keeping fraudulent records, my options narrowed considerably. Report him and risk my own professional reputation by association, or become complicit by staying silent. My phone rang. Marcus calling for an update. Victoria gave me a USB drive, I told him after explaining our lunch meeting. She says it contains a second set of books Adrian kept for the company. Marcus's sharp intake of breath was audible. Don't open it. Not yet. If it contains evidence of financial crimes and you access it improperly, it could compromise its admissibility. So what do I do? Hand it over to the authorities? First, we need to understand what we're dealing with. I'll come by with a forensic accountant I trust. We'll make a proper copy and examine it with the right protocols in place. After hanging up, I leaned back in my chair, gazing out at the ocean. The water stretched endlessly before me, blue meeting blue at the horizon, a view that had always, brought me clarity. My father had taught me to swim in those waves, had encouraged me to face my fears by diving into the deepest parts. The ocean doesn't care how scared you are, Emmy, he'd say. It rewards courage and respects caution, but it punishes indecision. The doorbell rang an hour later. Marcus had arrived with Janet Wong, a forensic accountant with impeccable credentials and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Ms. Carter," she greeted me with a firm handshake. "I understand we're looking at potentially problematic financial records." We set up in my father's old study, now my home office. Janet produced specialized equipment to create an exact forensic copy of the drive's contents without altering the original metadata. "This preserves the chain of evidence," she explained as she worked. "If these files do show irregularities, we'll want clean, admissible documentation." The copying process took 30 minutes, during which Marcus updated me on the client situation. "Johnson and Patel are definitely staying with you. Thorpe is on the fence. Adrian got to him first with some story about you having a breakdown. Rivera canceled his project entirely. He doesn't want to be, involved in what he called designer drama." I winced at the loss of the Rivera contract, a $1.2 million renovation of a historic property in Coral Gables. "What about staffing? Has Adrian contacted the design team?" "He's offered positions to Tyler and Sophia," Marcus said, naming two of our junior designers. "Double their current salaries, apparently." "With what money?" I asked, incredulous. "If he emptied the company accounts." "Done," Janet announced, interrupting our conversation. She disconnected her equipment and inserted a new drive into my laptop. "Ready to see what we've got?" The three of us gathered around the screen as Janet navigated through folders with clinical efficiency. At first glance, the content seemed mundane. Spreadsheets, PDFs, QuickBooks files, until Janet opened a folder labeled AC Private. "Interesting," she murmured, clicking through subfolders. "He's maintained parallel records for the past 3 years. This one shows the books you'd have seen." She opened a spreadsheet labeled CC Official 2024. "And this one shows what appears to be the actual numbers." She opened them side by side, and even to my untrained eye, the discrepancies were glaring. Projects with reported profits of 15% were actually yielding 25-30%, with the difference funneled into accounts labeled only with initials and numbers. "He's been skimming," Janet said flatly, "systematically underreporting profits and diverting the difference. From what I can see, we're talking about approximately $1.7 million over 3 years. The room seemed to tilt slightly. "That's impossible," I said. "I would have noticed that kind of discrepancy in our accounts." "Not necessarily," Janet replied, scrolling through more files. "He's been clever about it, taking small percentages from multiple projects rather than large sums from a few, and it looks like he falsified vendor invoices to cover some of the diversion." Marcus leaned closer to the screen. "Is there any indication Emily was aware of or involved in these activities?" Janet shook her head. "Nothing I can see so far. In fact," she opened another file, "there are notes here about keeping certain information specifically from EC. Given the context, I assume that's you, Ms. Carter." Relief flooded me, followed immediately by anger. Not only had Adrian been stealing from our business, but he'd been deliberately hiding it from me, treating me as both partner and Mark simultaneously. "There's more," Janet said, opening a folder labeled Villa Leverage. "These appear to be plans for transferring ownership of your Ocean Drive property to the company, then using it as collateral for a significant loan." The documents were meticulous. Falsified consent forms with crude imitations of my signature, backdated board minutes from meetings that never happened, even a drafted press release announcing that Colin Carter Design will leverage its flagship property to expand operations throughout South Florida. "He was planning to steal my home through the company," I said, the pieces finally fitting together. "That's why he needed the Lane connection, to get approval for the loan despite the questionable documentation." "Gregory Lane sits on the board of First Atlantic Bank," Marcus noted. "Adrian would have had a much easier path to approval with the Lane family's implicit endorsement." Janet continued exploring the files, occasionally making notes or bookmarking particularly significant documents. "Ms. Carter, based on what I'm seeing, you have grounds for a criminal complaint. This goes beyond partnership disputes into fraud, embezzlement, and attempted property theft." The word criminal hung in the air. Despite everything, some part of me still found it difficult to reconcile the Adrian I'd worked with for 5 years with the calculating thief revealed in these files. "What happens if I file a criminal complaint?" I asked. "The investigation would become public," Marcus replied. "It would affect the company reputation, potentially frighten clients, and delay any resolution of the partnership dissolution. On the other hand," Janet added, "without formal charges, recovering the diverted funds becomes much more difficult. Civil proceedings are slower and often less effective than criminal asset seizure. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. A photo appeared. Adrian at our office with two unknown men, removing computers and file boxes. The message came from Melanie, our receptionist. He showed up with these guys claiming to be tech support and said they needed to update all systems immediately. They're taking everything. I showed Marcus and Janet the photo. He's clearing out the office right now. Marcus was already reaching for his phone. I'll call the police. This is theft, plain and simple. Wait, I said, a sudden clarity washing over me. Adrian was acting out of desperation, making rash moves to salvage whatever he could. Perhaps there was a better way to resolve this, one that would protect the company and my reputation without dragging us through years of legal battles. Let me try something first, I told Marcus. Give me 30 minutes before calling the police. He looked skeptical but nodded. 30 minutes. But if he's removing company property, we need to act quickly. I scrolled through my contacts, finding the number I needed. Taking a deep breath, I pressed dial. Mrs. Lane? It's Emily Carter. I've discovered some information about Adrian's financial activities that you and Mr. Lane should be aware of. It potentially impacts your family's bank. I paused, listening to her sharp question. Yes, I have documentation. No, I haven't gone to the authorities yet. I thought your family deserved to know first, given your near connection to him. As I outlined what we'd found, Patricia Lane's responses became increasingly clipped and precise, the attorney emerging from behind the society matriarch. I see, she said finally. And Adrian is currently at your office removing evidence? According to my staff, yes. Stay where you are. Gregory will handle this immediately. The line went dead. I looked up at Marcus and Janet. The Lanes are intervening. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Is that wise? They're not law enforcement. In Palm Beach, they might as well be, I replied. And they have something the police don't. A personal stake in making sure this situation is resolved quickly and quietly. Less than 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. An unknown number. Ms. Carter. Gregory Lane's deep voice was immediately recognizable. The situation at your office has been contained. Adrian Cole is currently in my private conference room at First Atlantic, along with representatives from our security team and legal department. I believe he's ready to discuss a resolution that would satisfy all parties. All parties? I echoed, surprised. Indeed. He seems particularly motivated after I mentioned that his financial activities might interest our friends at the SEC and IRS. Gregory's tone was calm but left no doubt about the severity of the threat. Perhaps you and your attorney would join us? I believe. We can resolve this matter without unnecessary public attention. I looked at Marcus, who had been listening to my side of the conversation with increasing interest. We'll be there in 20 minutes, I told Gregory Lane. As I hung up, Marcus gave a low whistle. Having the Lanes as allies certainly changes the dynamic. But be careful, Emily. Their primary interest is protecting their own reputation and the bank. Your interests are secondary. I understand, I assured him, already gathering my things. But right now, our goals align. Adrian threatened their daughter, tried to defraud their bank, and embarrassed them socially. They want him neutralized as much as I do. Janet carefully packed up her equipment. I'll prepare a preliminary report on my findings. If you proceed with legal action, you'll have the documentation you need. As we prepared to leave, I paused at my father's photograph on the desk. What would he advise in this situation? Pursue justice at all costs? Or find a pragmatic resolution that would allow me to move forward? The answer, I realized, would depend on what awaited me in Gregory Lane's conference room and whether Adrian Cole had finally recognized that he'd lost. First Atlantic Bank's executive floor exuded quiet power. No ostentatious displays of wealth, just understated elegance. Hand-knotted Persian rugs, oil paintings by respected artists, and furniture that whispered old money rather than shouting new riches. Gregory Lane's private conference room continued this theme. A mahogany table that could have witnessed a century of business deals, chairs upholstered in butter-soft leather, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Worth Avenue. The message was clear. This was a place where significant decisions were made, by people who didn't need to prove their importance. Adrian sat at the far end of the table, flanked by two men whose tailored suits couldn't disguise their security backgrounds. Gone was the charismatic, confident partner I'd known for 5 years. This Adrian was pale, disheveled, his usual polish replaced by a desperate sheen of sweat. Gregory Lane stood as Marcus and I entered, extending his hand with perfect courtesy. Ms. Carter, Mr. Whitfield, thank you for joining us promptly. Patricia Lane sat beside him, immaculate in a navy suit, her expression revealing nothing. Victoria was noticeably absent. "I believe you know everyone here except Mr. Fairchild." Gregory indicated a silver-haired man seated to his right. "David is First Atlantic's chief counsel." Fairchild nodded briskly, his assessing gaze moving between Adrian and me. This wasn't his first corporate standoff. "Now then," Gregory continued once we were seated, "Mr. Cole has been explaining his creative accounting practices regarding Cole and Carter design." His tone made it clear exactly what he thought of those practices. "In light of certain documentation that's come to our attention, he's prepared to offer a settlement proposal." Adrian cleared his throat, not quite meeting my eyes. "I'll relinquish all claims to the company and its assets. Return the funds I transferred this morning. Sign over my ownership percentage. In exchange, no criminal charges." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since entering. The man I'd trusted with my career, my designs, nearly my home, reduced to bargaining for his freedom. I felt no satisfaction, just a hollow sense of waste. "That's insufficient," Marcus stated flatly. "The diverted funds total approximately $1.7 million over 3 years, according to our preliminary accounting. Simply returning this morning's transfer doesn't address that theft." Adrian flinched at the word theft, glancing nervously at the Lane family. "I don't have liquid assets of that magnitude," he said, desperation leaking into his voice. "Most of it went into maintaining appearances," Patricia Lane finished for him, contempt evident in her clipped tone. "The watches, the sports car, the vacations, the 5-carat diamond that impressed absolutely no one who matters." Gregory raised a hand, silencing further comment. "Mr. Cole has provided a full accounting of his current assets. While insufficient to cover the full amount, they represent a significant partial recovery." He slid a document across the table to Marcus. "The remainder could be structured as a payment plan with appropriate security." Marcus reviewed the document carefully, occasionally consulting notes on his tablet. I recognized the thoroughness with which the Lanes had approached this negotiation. A comprehensive list of Adrian's holdings, from his waterfront condo to investment accounts, even his car collection. "You've been busy this morning," I commented to Gregory. A thin smile crossed his face. "When one discovers a potential fraud involving one's institution, swift action is prudent." I understood the subtext. Adrian's scheme to leverage my villa for a bank loan would have required the Lane family's influence at First Atlantic. Had it succeeded, their reputation for due diligence would have been compromised. "There's the matter of the company's intellectual property and ongoing client relationships," Marcus noted, still reviewing the asset list. Adrian shifted uncomfortably. "I've already contacted some clients." "We're aware," Gregory interrupted. "Those situations are being clarified as we speak. Mr. Cole will be signing a comprehensive non-solicitation agreement covering all current and former clients of Cole and Carter Design." My surprise must have shown because Patricia added, "Consider it part of making amends for our family's unwitting role in this situation, Ms. Carter." For the next hour, Marcus negotiated specific terms with Fairchild while I sat in silence, watching Adrian's empire crumble clause by clause. The surrender of his ownership stake, the transfer of assets, the non-compete provisions that would effectively end his career in South Florida. I'd expected to feel vindicated. Instead, I felt oddly detached, as if watching the conclusion of a play rather than the resolution of my own life's drama. "There's one more thing," I said finally, when the negotiation seemed complete. All eyes turned to me. "I want a public statement acknowledging my role as the principal designer of all Cole and Carter projects," I stated calmly. "Not for publicity, but for correction of the record. Adrian has systematically taken credit for my work for years. That ends today." Adrian's face flushed. "That's entirely reasonable," Patricia Lane interjected smoothly. "The statement will be drafted today and distributed to all industry publications." She gave Adrian a piercing look. "Consider yourself fortunate. Mr. Cole, Ms. Carter could demand far more damaging public disclosures." The meaning wasn't lost on Adrian. If the full extent of his financial manipulations became public, his professional reputation wouldn't be the only casualty. "Fine," he muttered, defeated. "Whatever you want." As the lawyers finalized documents, Adrian sat hunched and diminished, occasionally signing where indicated with mechanical compliance. This wasn't the ending he'd envisioned when he'd started courting Victoria Lane, when he'd plotted to leverage my home, when he'd called me too soft to fight back. When everything was signed, Gregory Lane stood, signaling the meeting's conclusion. Mr. Cole will be escorted to return any remaining company property in his possession, he announced. Ms. Carter, a word in Biam. Private before you leave? Adrian was led out by the security men, not looking back as he exited. 5 years of partnership ended with not even a goodbye. Gregory guided me to a smaller sitting area adjacent to the conference room, Patricia joining us while Marcus remained behind to review final documentation with Fairchild. You've handled this situation with remarkable composure, Gregory observed once we were seated. Many would have pursued a more vindictive approach. Vindictiveness requires energy I'd rather invest elsewhere, I replied honestly. The company, my designs, my home, that's what matters to me. Patricia nodded approvingly. A practical philosophy. Now, regarding the cultural center project we discussed this morning, I'd like to proceed, I said, making the decision in that moment. Under my own name, with my own firm. Excellent, Gregory said. The Lane Foundation will be your first client, then. A fitting new beginning. As they outlined the project parameters, I felt a weight lifting. Not just the resolution of the Adrian situation, but the recognition of a new chapter beginning. For years, I'd designed beautiful spaces for others while allowing my own life to be overshadowed. That ended today. One last thing, Patricia said as our discussion concluded. Victoria asked me to give you this. She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. Emily, thank you for your grace during this mess. Some good should come from it all. Welcome to my mother's Rolodex. It's more valuable than any property in Palm Beach. Victoria beneath was, a list of names. Prominent families, developers, and institutions throughout South Florida, with contact information and personal notes about each. I looked up at Patricia, who offered a rare, genuine smile. The Lane family repays its debts, she said simply, and recognizes talent worth nurturing. As I left First Atlantic, the afternoon sun bathed Worth Avenue in golden light. For the first time in years, I felt fully present in my own life. No longer the shadow partner, the silent creator, the too soft one. I was Emily Carter, standing in my own light at last. 6 months can change everything. On a perfect October evening, I stood on the balcony of my Ocean Drive villa, watching the sunset paint the Atlantic in shades of amber and rose. The same view I'd grown up with, the same panorama. My father had loved, but I saw it with new eyes now. Below me, caterers moved efficiently across the terrace, setting up for tonight's event. Soft music drifted upward, mingling with the rhythmic sound of waves breaking on the shore. Everything was ready. Emily? Melanie appeared at the balcony door, tablet in hand. The first guest will arrive in 30 minutes. The champagne is chilled, the displays are set, and the press has started gathering at the entrance. Thank you, I said, taking a final moment with the view before turning away. Is Marcus here yet? Arrived 10 minutes ago. He's reviewing the contracts one last time. Typical Marcus. She smiled fondly. After the dissolution of Cole & Carter Design, Melanie had been the first to join Emily Carter Design, now ECD Architecture, and Interiors, bringing her organizational skills and institutional knowledge that had proven invaluable during the transition. In my bedroom, I slipped into the dress I'd chosen specifically for tonight, a simple column of emerald silk that felt like wearing confidence. No flashy jewelry, just my grandmother's pearl earrings, and the quiet self-assurance that comes from standing firmly in your own truth. Downstairs, the villa had been transformed into a showcase for ECD's philosophy and aesthetic. The renovation I'd completed after my father's death now served as both my home and the firm's flagship project, with each room highlighting the principles that guided my work. Respect for history, functional elegance, and authentic materials that told their own stories. The Lane Cultural Center. Designs were displayed prominently in the main salon. Renderings, material samples, and a scale model showing my vision for what would become Palm Beach's most significant new public building in decades. Construction had already begun, with completion scheduled for next fall. Quite an accomplishment, said a familiar voice behind me. I turned to find Patricia Lane studying the model, elegant as always in black. Mrs. Lane, I greeted her. I didn't realize you'd arrived. Gregory's parking the car. He refuses to use valets, says they never adjust the seat properly. She moved closer to examine the model's details. The board is extremely pleased with the direction. Your integration of the historical elements with contemporary functionality is precisely what we hoped for. Coming from Patricia Lane, this was effusive praise. "Thank you," I said simply. "It's been a privilege working on it." "Emily." Victoria entered with a small entourage of friends, looking genuinely pleased to see me. In the months since the Adrian debacle, we'd developed an unexpected friendship. Not close confidants, but mutual respect that occasionally included lunch at Green's Pharmacy, where we were now, greeted as regulars. Victoria embraced me warmly. "The place looks amazing, and I brought reinforcements for your big night." She gestured to her friends, all daughters of prominent Palm Beach families. Everyone's dying to discuss potential projects. As the villa filled with guests, clients, industry professionals, media, and Palm Beach society members curious about the new design firm making waves, I moved through my home with a sense of surreal gratitude. 6 months ago, I'd been fighting to prevent Adrian from stealing this very property. Now I was hosting the official launch party for my own firm here, backed by the most influential family in Palm Beach. William Johnson approached, champagne in hand. "Emily, the water sedge project renderings are extraordinary. When can we break ground?" "The permits should clear next month," I assured him. "We're ready to move the moment they do." "Excellent. And I've referred the Morgensterns to you. They're looking to renovate their place on Jupiter Island. Budget is no concern." This had become a pattern. Clients not just staying with me after the split with Adrian, but actively referring others. The Lane endorsement had opened doors, but it was the quality of my work that kept them open. Near the terrace doors, I spotted Marcus deep in conversation with a journalist from Architectural Digest, presumably discussing the profile they were preparing on ECD's meteoric rise. The term made me smile. Nothing about this journey had felt meteoric. Each step, from confronting Adrian at the engagement party to the negotiations at first. Atlantic, from forming my own company to winning the Lane Cultural Center commission, had required courage, persistence, and a willingness to stand in my truth, even when it felt easier to retreat. "Ms. Carter?" A young woman approached, notebook in hand. "Lily Chen from the Palm Beach Post. Could I ask about the rumored Adrian Cole bankruptcy filing? Sources say he's left Florida entirely." I had heard the same rumors. After our settlement, Adrian had attempted to rebuild in Miami, but doors had closed before he could even knock. Whether due to the Lane family's influence or simple word of mouth in the tightly connected South Florida design community, he'd found himself professionally radioactive. "I'm afraid I have no comment on Mr. Cole's situation," I replied. "Tonight is about looking forward, not back." Lily nodded, changing tack. "Then perhaps you could comment on being named to Coastal Living's 40 under 40 list. The article describes you as the visionary designer who's been hiding in plain sight for years." Before I could answer, Gregory Lane joined us, imposing in his quiet way. "Ms. Chen, I believe the bar is serving a remarkable rosé champagne that shouldn't be missed. Perhaps we could continue this conversation later. I need to borrow our host briefly." As Lily retreated, Gregory guided me toward a quieter corner of the room. "Forgive the interruption. Patricia and I wanted a private word before the formal presentations begin." Patricia appeared at his side, her expression uncharacteristically warm. "We've come to a decision about the Lane Foundation's annual design grant. This year, we'd like it to fund an internship program at ECD, focusing on young designers from backgrounds underrepresented in architecture. The grant was significant, $250,000 annually, and highly prestigious within the industry." "That's incredibly generous," I managed, genuinely moved. "But why ECD? We're still establishing ourselves." "Because you understand the value of recognizing talent regardless of packaging," Patricia said simply. "And because some debts can never be fully repaid." I knew she wasn't referring to money, but to the deeper debt of having almost facilitated Adrian's scheme through their daughter's engagement. "Besides," Gregory added with a rare smile, "it's good business. Your firm represents the future of design in this region. The Lane family prefers to be ahead of trends, not following them." As they moved away to greet other guests, I found myself alone for a moment, taking in the scene around me. My home filled with people who respected my work, my vision prominently displayed, my name on the designs and the company letterhead. Marcus appeared at my side. "It's time for your speech," he murmured. "Full house, all the right people." I nodded, suddenly nervous despite the months of preparation for this moment. As I made my way to the small podium set up near the terrace doors, conversations quieted, attention focusing on me. "Good evening, everyone," I began, looking out at the sea of faces. Thank you for joining me to celebrate the official launch of ECD Architecture and Interiors. The words I'd prepared flowed easily. Acknowledgments of key clients, excitement about upcoming projects, gratitude toward my growing team. But as I neared the conclusion, I set aside my notes, wanting to speak from the heart. Some of you know that 6 months ago, I faced a pivotal moment, one that required me to either stand up for myself or surrender everything I'd built. A few knowing glances exchanged among those familiar with the Adrian situation. What I learned through that experience wasn't about fighting or winning, but about the power of quiet truth. The room had gone completely still, even the waitstaff pausing to listen. My father used to tell me that success without principles isn't success at all. It's just an expensive form of failure. For years, I allowed someone else to take credit for my creativity, to diminish my contribution, to make me doubt my own worth. I believed that being accommodating meant being professional. I looked around at the villa, my father's legacy, my sanctuary, the home I'd fought to keep. But true professionalism isn't about accommodating dishonesty or accepting disrespect. It's about doing your best work with integrity, about valuing your own contribution enough to ensure it's recognized. It's about knowing when to speak up, even when silence seems safer. My gaze found Patricia Lane, who nodded almost imperceptibly. ECD is built on that understanding. Every design we create, every space we transform, carries that commitment to authenticity and value. We don't just design beautiful environments. We create honest ones, where nothing is pretense and everything has purpose. I raised my champagne glass. So tonight, I invite you all to join me in celebrating not just a new firm, but a new approach, one where recognition flows to those who earn it through excellence, rather than those who claim it through audacity. Applause filled the room, genuine and enthusiastic. As it subsided, I added one final thought. My father also taught me that the ocean rewards courage and respects caution, but punishes indecision. Tonight, looking out at that same ocean from this home he left me, I can say with certainty, I've found my courage, and I'm deciding to move forward, creating spaces and a life defined by truth rather than fear. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations, congratulations, and concrete project discussions. By the time the last guest departed near midnight, ECD had secured 3 new major commissions and preliminary discussions for 5 more. Marcus lingered to help me see off the catering staff, both of us tired but satisfied with the evening's success. "You did it," he said simply as we stood on the front steps, watching the final vehicles pull away. "Exactly what you said you would." "Not alone," I acknowledged, thinking of his steadfast legal support, Melanie's organizational brilliance, the Lane family's strategic backing, and even Victoria's unexpected alliance. "No," he agreed, "but it would never have happened if you hadn't found your voice that night at the engagement party." After Marcus left, I returned to the balcony where my evening had begun. The ocean stretched dark and infinite before me, moonlight creating a silver path across the waves. The same view that had witnessed my father's life, my own struggles, and now this new beginning. I thought of Adrian briefly, wondering where he was tonight, if he regretted his choices or simply resented being caught. In the end, it didn't matter. His story was no longer intertwined with mine. Palm Beach glittered along the coastline, a community I'd once felt peripheral to despite my address and professional success. Now I understood that belonging wasn't about social acceptance, but about standing firmly in your own truth, about claiming your rightful place rather than waiting for permission to occupy it. The property title that had featured so dramatically in my confrontation with Adrian now rested securely in my office safe, a reminder, not of victory, but of the importance of protecting what matters. Not just physical assets, but personal dignity, creative ownership, the right to be recognized for your true contribution. The ocean rewards courage, I whispered to myself, echoing my father's wisdom and my own words from earlier that evening. The breeze carried my voice away, blending it with the eternal rhythm of waves breaking against the shore. I had found my courage, claimed my voice, and created something authentic from the wreckage of betrayal. The villa remained mine, but more importantly, so did my dignity. Not because I had fought for it, but because I had finally recognized it was too valuable to surrender. Tomorrow would bring new designs to create, new spaces to transform, new challenges to navigate. But tonight, standing on my balcony under the vast Florida sky, I was exactly where I belonged. In my own home, in my own company, in my own truth. And that, I realized, was the most beautiful design of all.